Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sprint 238 review. This is a normal 2-week sprint, but we did have a holiday in the middle for Memorial Day. But let's get started. I'll start with the overview. I have a community announcement after that. Jeffrey then on the UI, followed by Adam on providers, and Joe on the platform. As you can see, the sprint was a little light with 81 PRs merged this sprint and 30 bugs, 22 enhancements, and a smattering of the rest. On the community side, I'd like to announce the release of ManageIQ Kinteros 1. There's the blog post there, and I'd like to thank everyone in the community and all the contributors that made this happen. And we're well on our way to working on the Rajabov release, which will be the R release. And over to Jeffrey on the UI.
Thanks, Jason. In the sprint, a total of 14 PRs got merged into the UI Classic repo, out of which 4 are related to bug fix, 3 for enhancements, and 6 others. I can explain about them in the following slides. This is a follow-up PR from Gilbert to make changes in the workflow status data. When the current state is done, its value is not removed and exists in the history, and this PR ensures that it would only render it as past state. Next slide. The workflow states table breaks when the workflow status is running, and Gilbert fixed this by introducing additional checks in the React component. Next slide. While debugging an issue, Jace identified few issues in the provisioning and retirement tabs. The wall credential was rendered twice, and the keys used to fetch the wall credential data was different. And this PR is from Jace, and he had solved issues in the UI side. Next slide. The workflow instances were being listed in the Ansible Tower template list. Embedded workflows in the service dialog screens were listing Ansible repositories, and Gilbert fixed this by modifying the URLs used to fetch the results, and also made a few changes in the associated controller files. Next slide. Another PR from Gilbert to include the current state to the workflow states table. He also formatted the duration of the time to be displayed in as a string in days, hours, minutes, seconds format instead of just seconds. Next slide. Gilbert introduced the Terraform template catalog items form and the summary pages. Next slide. This is just a small enhancement PR to remove the duplicate title from the image and template selection pages. This also fixes few alignments for the data tables. Next slide. For the other PRs, Jason updated the Yarn version to 4.2.2 and updated the yarn.log with latest dependencies. We also fixed a few React.js test cases warning related to the components like attach, detach cloud volume form, host edit form, cloud object, store container form, and copy dashboard form. That's all from the UI side. Over to Adam for providers.
Thanks, Jeffrey. For Record the Sprint, we fixed a bug where the default value for timeout for an embedded Ansible playbook run would default to 0.minutes instead of the default value. So this was causing, obviously, any playbook run to immediately time out if you didn't pass a timeout value as part of your service catalog order. So we got that fixed up. So it'll default to, I think it's 10 minutes or something like that. But whatever the default was before, it's defaulting to that now if you don't provide a timeout value. Jason added a test to confirm that provider seeding for any built-in content is successful so that we can pick up on any failures early on in the PR process. For embedded Terraform this sprint, a lot of PRs merged. We added a volume for the OpenTofu runner on Podify to mount TLS certs. LJ split the IBM Cloud credential into a classic and a normal IBM Cloud credential since they were non-overlapping sets of values that we were taking for it. So now it's a little more obvious that you just pick classic if that's the one that you want to use. We added service catalog and service template support for embedded Terraform. We ensured the correct port is exposed for the OpenTofu runner on Kubernetes. We fixed some provision options in the embedded Terraform stack. The initial implementation, we didn't have the UI ready for it yet, so it was harder to test with values as they would flow through when the UI created it. So once we had the UI land, a couple of bugs fell out of that we got fixed up. And we fixed a couple of issues with the OpenTofu runner with the systemd unit. Once we got an image that we were able to test with, kind of in a similar vein, we found a bunch of bugs that fixed up once that OpenTofu image landed. Next slide. For VMware, these two PRs are related to running with a Go VC simulator. So the event manager doesn't have a user event method on the VC simulator. So we're now catching handsoap faults when you run any options like, VM start. We used to log a user event for VM start. We no longer will fail the VM start if the user event logging fails. So we're catching that exception and continuing on. We also fixed a bug with the VM provision data store property. So it was passing a standard string as opposed to a VMware Vim string, which represented the managed object type properly. This was working on a real VC, but failing on a VC simulator. And once we got that fixed up, I was at least able to do a provision of VM from a template on a VC simulator. For workflows, Jason renamed the built-in scheme to ManageIQ, so it's more obvious what the methods you're calling are related to. He also added a raise an exception if the built-in workflow that's being seeded is invalid, so that would trip the previously mentioned core test. The state input, Keenan added a PR to use state input to update the provision task options. So if you were using your ASL workflow to drive a provision, you could manipulate the provision options as part of the context state. We also allowed the provision execute built-in method to call any MIQ provision object. Previously, it was only a service template provision, but we wanted to allow any MIQ provision type to be called. And finally, for flow, in addition to a bunch of other things, the one that the only kind of notable PR here was that we fixed a failed workflow that was left in the running state, which would cause the caller, if it was checking that, to essentially hang indefinitely if the workflow failed, because it was waiting for it to go to either success or state. It was just left and running. And that is it for providers. Over to Joe.
Thanks, Adam. For platform enhancements and improvements, Adam added a deliver bang method to raise an error in the event the generic mailer delivery fails. The goal is to bubble this information up to any long-running associated tasks. Keenan added some support attributes features to the VMware template and cloud volume models. Sudhir added an OpenShift network policy for the OpenTofu runner. And Sudhir also added the similar OpenShift service for the OpenTofu runner. Jason added the Postgres contrib package, which is also needed for the OpenTofu runner. And I made some initial backward compatible changes to the ManageIQ schema repo with the hopes to support both Rails 6.1 and now 7.0. Next slide. For platform bugs, Adam marked the associated task as finished if the generic mailer fails due to a missing notifier role. Adam also reverted a change I made for Rails 7 support, which was causing issues if the settings constant is set up at the wrong time during the application initialization. Next, Adam already discussed the playbook timeout bug fix. And let's see, next, Adam refactored the common method used to ask for a new password in the appliance console, as we had several different mechanisms. Nassar removed the creation of the ManageIQ liveness check topic as it was handled separately. Brennan fixed a bug in the operator looking up the object secret correctly that was causing a segmentation violation. Sudhir fixed the pod selector label for OpenTofu runners network policy. And Adam also discussed the provider seeding test fix that Jason did. Next, Keenan fixed a default request type for the service reconfigure test factory. And Adam fixed the storage VMware factory as it had no class name. Next slide. Oh, this was an extra slide. Yeah, it was from last spring.
Oh.
Next slide.
So no slide. All right, thanks, Joe. That concludes the Sprint 238 review. Our next Sprint 239 review will be on June 12th at the usual place and time. And as always, I'd like to thank all the contributors to ManageIQ, all our presenters today, and all of our community members. Thank you.